2022 was the year we got a new king, Charles III. He got that job without being elected and without even being vetted. His only qualification is that he happens to be the eldest child of the last person who did it. But forever handing down the role to the next in the family line means that eventually you're bound to end up with someone who just isn't up to the job. Charles's accession to the throne was a highly choreographed and carefully planned affair. As sad as it may have been for him, we all know that the Queen's death was the most important moment of his life. He'd waited 75 years for it. But even with all that preparation and all that waiting, Charles couldn't help but give us a glimpse of his true character.
Is it September 12th?
13th, sir.
Oh God, wrong date. 13?
Yes, sir.
You sound 12th earlier.
Where did I go to 12th? I'm sorry, oh God, I hate this.
No, look, it's going everywhere. Hang on. So nobody got it wrong.
What is that?
No, look, it's everywhere.
Can't bear this bloody thing. What do I do? Everyone stinks.
So that's what you become when you believe you're handpicked by God to ascend to the throne, when you've been surrounded by sycophants your whole life, and when the people around you hang on your every word, no matter how ill-informed. This is one of Charles's biographers, Tom Bower.
He's a man who is frightfully self-indulgent. His eating habits, his travel habits, his extravagance, his unwillingness to actually understand that he looks sometimes faintly ridiculous. His commitment to complementary medicine, where he believed that cancer could be cured by coffee enemas, was bizarre.
The issue isn't just that Charles believes bizarre things, which he really does. It's that he's repeatedly used his position to force his beliefs on the public. Edzard Ernst was professor of complementary medicine at Exeter University. An academic physician, he was interested in the possibility that complementary medicine might actually work. And so he subjected various treatments to rigorous trials. That's when Prince Charles became interested.
When I came to Exeter, I noticed with delight that Prince Charles took an interest in what I was doing. He even asked for a copy of my inaugural lecture, and I was delighted because I thought he was going to support me. Well, Prince Charles has a bee under his bonnet about alternative medicine, and he thinks that the NHS should pay for it. But the NHS should pay for what is evidence-based, not for what Prince Charles happens to like. And I think we should investigate it properly.
Ernst devised trials to test the efficacy of various homeopathic and herbal treatments. But on every trial, the alternative remedies failed. Charles wasn't satisfied with those results, though. He tasked economist Sir Christopher Smallwood with writing a report advocating for the use of alternative medicines on the NHS, despite knowing that the trials had failed. The report was published in 2005, and it was funded by this woman, Shirley Porter. She was the Tory leader of Westminster Council who oversaw a racist and classist Homes for Votes scheme in the council, which won the Tories a decisive victory in 1990. When the story broke years later, Porter was stripped of her damehood and left the UK in disgrace. Ernst gave an interview to The Times to express his anxiety about the content of the report. The consequences for him were grave.
In this interview with The Times, I said that I fear that he's overstepping his mark in terms of what he's supposed to be doing as heir to the throne. On the same day, I got an email from Christopher Smallwood that he would make sure that I would regret that. An official complaint from Charles's office reached my Vice-Chancellor, and my Vice-Chancellor started 13 months investigation into my dealings in this affair. At the end of this, I was pronounced innocent, but all support at Exeter broke down. Contracts were discontinued, and eventually I had to go into early retirement. He doesn't seem to tolerate anybody who has the slightest difference in opinion to his own.
Over the years, Charles has lobbied the government repeatedly over his often fringe hobbies. In 2006, he took the Daily Mail to court after they published some extracts from his journal, and during the case, his former spin doctor submitted this witness statement. The prince used all the means of communication at his disposal, including meetings with ministers and others, speeches and correspondence with leaders in all walks of life and politicians. He was never party political, but to argue that he was not political was difficult. These letters were not merely routine and non-controversial, but written at times in extreme terms, containing his views on political matters and individual politicians at home and abroad, and on international issues. He often referred to himself as a, quote, dissident, working against the prevailing political consensus. I remember on many occasions seeing in these letters, which, for example, denounced the elected leaders of other countries in extreme terms and other such highly politically sensitive correspondence. It took The Guardian 10 years of legal wrangling to get hold of those letters. They included advice about which helicopter the army should be using and a recommendation of a badger cull. But they also contained a request to Tony Blair to delay implementing an EU law restricting the sale of herbal medicines. Paul Richards was advisor to the Blair government in the years that the letters were written. He spoke to Channel 4 after their publication.
Well, certainly the letters that I saw lobbying on behalf of so-called alternative medicines, homeopathy and so on, well, around about that time, £1 million was given to Charles's Foundation for Homeopathy and Alternative Medicines. Another letter I saw invited a minister to come and visit his architectural experiments at Poundbury, and a space was found in the diary within minutes for the minister to go and visit. So, yes, you have to argue that there is some influence being brought to bear.
After the publication of those 27 letters, the Cameron government changed the law, making it almost impossible for any others to see the light of day. Why? Well, Dominic Grieve was Attorney General at the time. He tried to block the publication of the 27 Black Spider memos, writing this: "The sovereign cannot be seen to favour one political party above another or to engage in political controversy. Any such perception would be seriously damaging to his role as future monarch, because if he forfeits his position of political neutrality as heir to the throne, he cannot easily recover it when he is king." So, they knew that Charles's exercise of his influence on government ministers would threaten his status as future monarch. And there's little reason to suppose that Charles will stop meddling now that he's king. Let's move on to the issue of money and Charles's extraordinary wealth and sometimes unsavoury connections. The sovereign of the United Kingdom is always extremely rich, but Charles's wealth is almost unbelievable, especially when you consider he's never done a proper day's work in his life. The financial arrangements of the king are incredibly murky, but we've managed to piece together some of the puzzle. Before he became king, Charles, as Prince of Wales, owned the Duchy of Cornwall. It consists of a mix of land and investments and includes the Oval Cricket Ground, 20,000 acres of Cornwall, almost all of the Isles of Scilly, and large swathes of Dartmoor, Somerset and Herefordshire. It owns almost all of the coastline around Cornwall, as well as the carcasses of any whales or sturgeons that wash up on it. Because he owned so much of the land, Charles was also a huge landlord, even to people who owned the houses that they lived in. That's because homeowners on the duchy estate exist in a bizarre feudal system where they must pay annual rents to the Prince of Wales even if they own their house. That's because the land always belongs to him. Elsewhere in the UK, the government gave leasehold property owners the right to force their landlord to sell them the land their houses are built on, but not Charles.
For the last 20 years, I have actually been pursuing why I cannot enfranchise my property. We've had various acts over the years, the last one in 2002, which gave the right to ordinary people to buy their landlord out, and so they owned the land which their property stood on. So whether you own 2 houses or 1 house, or whether you own 1,000 houses, the law applies equally across, except when it comes to the duchy, and the duchy exempt themselves from that. The other thing they've done is grant leases for the child's lifetime. And that means that, yes, they can build a house at their expense, but if they die, everything reverts to the duchy. So even if they have children, they have a wife, it all goes to the duchy. It's feudal. I think they think we're almost serfs, and the way they do things and the way they communicate with you really belongs to a different era.
The Duchy of Cornwall is worth more than £1 billion. Last year, it put a profit of nearly £22 million straight into Charles's pocket. It pays no corporation tax and has no obligation to disclose where it invests its money. However, the Paradise Papers leak showed that Charles had millions invested in offshore accounts, and all of that wealth will now pass to William, who won't pay a penny of inheritance tax on it. In return, the king will inherit his mother's estate, the Duchy of Lancaster. It consists of nearly 50,000 acres of land, historic buildings and commercial properties across England and Wales, as well as a considerable investment portfolio. It's worth £818 million and brought in £23 million in profit last year. Next year's profits will go straight to Charles, again without having to pay corporation tax. Charles also inherits the Queen's vast personal fortune, including properties such as Balmoral and Sandringham, as well as her cash and investments. In total, the Queen was thought to have been worth £370 million. But we don't actually know the full extent of the wealth that Charles will inherit. That's because, in the early 1970s, the Queen instructed government ministers to exempt the monarch from laws governing financial transparency. As a result, we don't know a lot about Charles's massively enlarged personal fortune, but we do know that he won't pay any inheritance tax on that either. In many ways, the monarch is supposed to be exemplary. Since he or she is totally exempt from arrest, criminal and civil prosecution, they have to be trusted to conform to the letter of the law in every respect. That means no shady business dealings. But Charles's record on this front is hardly exemplary. The Prince's Foundation is Charles's personal charity, and as Prince of Wales, he was very active in fundraising for it. Mahfouz Murray Mubarak bin Mahfouz is the son of one of Saudi Arabia's richest men and a billionaire. In 2011, he wanted to secure British citizenship through the Golden Visa system, which awards British residency to the rich in exchange for £2 million. And he was told by his advisors that his application would be boosted if he secured an honour. So, how did he set about getting one? Well, by allegedly paying tens of thousands of pounds to fixers to put him in touch with Prince Charles, and by handing millions to Prince Charles's charity. This is the Castle of May, the holiday home of Charles's grandmother. In 2015, a piece of its woodland was renamed the Mahfouz Woods after Mahfouz reportedly donated £370,000 for the castle's renovation. The Castle of May is managed by the Prince's Foundation. In October 2016, the Mahfouz Fountain and Garden was opened by Prince Charles at Dumfries House in Scotland. That was after Mahfouz donated £1 million to the charity. Dumfries House is also owned by the Prince's Foundation. And then in 2016, Mahfouz was awarded a CBE by Charles at a private ceremony at Buckingham Palace. So private, it wasn't even listed in the royals' official engagements. But you ask, perhaps Mahfouz was just really interested in architecture and Charles simply decided to reward him for his patronage. Nothing going on here we should worry about. Well, a 2021 Times investigation published leaked emails that show quite how flagrant the exchange of money for an honour really was. It reported this. In one email dated September the 1st, 2014, William Baldrick, the owner of Berks Peerage and a paid advisor to Mahfouz, told colleagues that once he has honourable OBE, then more money will flow. The OBE, he said, was promised to MBM, so that's Mahfouz bin Mahfouz, to get the £1.5 million he paid for Dumfries House and the Castle of May. Baldrick, whose centuries-old publication records the genealogy of the British aristocracy, added this: MF, so that's Michael Fawcett, needs to keep to his side of the bargain and sort out the honourable OBE immediately, then assist with citizenship. Michael Fawcett was Charles's right-hand man and chief executive of the Prince's Foundation. After the Times investigation, he stepped down, and Clarence House, that's Charles's residence before he became king, released this statement. The Prince of Wales has no knowledge of the alleged offer of honours on the basis of donation to his charities. Perhaps not, but Charles spent an awful lot of time with Mahfouz, as the Times reported in a later investigation. As well as the private investiture, Prince Charles took part in numerous private meetings with Mahfouz, wrote him a letter and even sent the Saudi a gift. All this took place while Fawcett, his right-hand man and close confidant, fixed Mahfouz a CBE in the background. In February this year, the Metropolitan Police launched an investigation into the Prince's Foundation, But perhaps Charles can be forgiven for a one-off scandal. Maybe he inadvertently found himself caught up in a cash for honours deal that he played no part in. Well, the problem with that line of thinking is that Charles has shown himself to be incapable of exercising any good judgment when large sums of money are involved. This is Lord Brownlow. You may remember him as the man who funded the £200,000 refurbishment of Boris Johnson's Downing Street apartment. Well, in 2018, Charles made him Commander of the Victorian Order. That's after Brownlow donated millions to, you guessed it, the Prince's Foundation. The Sunday Times reported this. Charles became close with the peer, whose fortune has been estimated at £271 million by the Sunday Times Rich List in 2020, after ignoring the advice of one of his most senior courtiers. The Palace insider was concerned Brownlow, 58, was using Charles to burnish his reputation, felt he had myriad conflicts of interest, and believed his judgment was wayward. They shared their views with the Prince. In 2007, Charles took out a £20 million loan to buy Dumfries House, that's the one we showed you earlier. To repay the loan, he decided to build 770 faux Georgian homes on a piece of nearby farmland. The new village would be called Knockroon. But the houses didn't sell, and in the end only 31 were built, so Charles abandoned Knockroon. Residents complain that it's a ghost town, just 31 ugly houses plonked down in the middle of fields. Enter Lord Brownlow, who swooped in to bail Charles out. Between 2012 and 2017, Brownlow spent £1.7 million purchasing 11 properties and converting them into buy-to-lets in a caff. That's according to official documents. The charity did not declare any of the purchases as related party transactions. This is a standard measure used to guard against perceived conflicts of interests and to demonstrate that trustees knew that money was going to someone who had existing ties to the charity. In 2013, Charles made Brownlow a trustee of the Prince's Foundation. Brownlow quit in 2017 and received an honour a year later. From then on, though, he just rose and rose. According to the Sunday Times, the CVO, which is the honour he received, is conferred for extraordinary, important or personal services to the royal family and is one of the awards bestowed at the sole discretion of the monarchy rather than one on the advice of politicians. Brownlow was appointed to the order as part of the Queen's Birthday Honours List in 2018, with the official notice describing him as the former chairman of Charles's foundation. The following year, Brownlow was knighted, and Theresa May nominated him to the House of Lords in 2019. The Office of the Scottish Charity Regulator is investigating Brownlow's transactions. A spokesperson said, "We can confirm that the work of Havisham Group, so that's Brownlow's company, and property transactions relating to the Knockroon development in Ayrshire form part of our overall investigation, work on which is ongoing." But that isn't even the worst of Charles's dodgy charity blunders. This is Hamad bin Jassim Al Thani. He was Prime Minister of Qatar between 2007 and 2013, and he was implicated in a number of controversies. It's alleged that Qatar secretly funded the Al-Nusra Front, that's a Syrian branch of Al-Qaeda, and Al-Thani was accused of kidnapping and torturing his former spokesperson Fawaz al-Attiyah. Now, his personal finances have also come under scrutiny. Worth a reported $1.2 billion, the leaked Panama and Paradise Papers showed his massive tax avoidance. Not a good guy. The Charities Commission is investigating how Charles accepted literal bags of money from Al-Thani. All in all, Charles accepted €3 million with the money handed to him on 3 different occasions. Once in a suitcase, then in a holdall, then in shopping bags. Shopping bags, of course, they were from the luxury department store Fortnum and Mason, not the local Tesco. All were stuffed with €500 notes, and despite the fact that handing over millions of euros in cash is more the style of criminal kingpins, Clarence House has insisted that everything was completely above board. They said this: "Charitable donations received from Sheikh Hamad bin Jassim were passed immediately to one of the Prince's charities, who carried out the appropriate governance and have assured us that all the correct processes were followed." So there you have him, subjects, your new king. Of course, he became king in 2022, but 2023 will be the year of his coronation. So expect more brown-nosing coverage from our mainstream media. Apologies, we will not follow suit.